topic is "In Surrender Lies Victory," and of course that's not exactly what, in a worldly sense, we would find a very good topic, because usually when we surrender, it's not victory, it's defeat, isn't it? We've lost, and losing, of course, is not very joyful. So, of course, we're speaking of this in a whole nother way. If you come here, you know that's what it's all about. So, we're talking about surrender, the inner surrender, not the outward surrender, not that in the physical world. But it's the surrender is really the foundation of the spiritual life. Because you look at St. Francis, who was the patron saint for Yogananda, his whole life was one of surrender. From one of being born into riches, a way of, easy living, parties. He was the life of the party. And yet, he was not happy. There was nothing, he was empty. And if you've traced his life, he went through a lot of suffering, trying to figure out what is it that I'm here for? What is this all about? And as we know, he found it. But it took him, in that particular time, giving up everything, renouncing everything, including his clothes, and going out into the world and finding God that way. Today, in society, it's not the way we do it, for most of us, for sure. But the concept is the same. We do have to surrender. And what is it that we're surrendering? Well, we're surrendering what we think is dear and precious to us. We're laying down what we call our ego attachments, our ego desires, our preferences, all those habits, reactions, everything that we surround ourselves with, thinking that this is who we are. Because obviously you have to function in the world, so just as a child has to build up a little bit of an ego so that he can function, we all have done that. But now's the time to realize that that's really not who we are. It's allowed us to function so far, but are we really happy, in this world? Are we really finding, through our ego, through all those things that we seek to make us happy? Yes, we're happy for a short period of time, but it goes away, doesn't it? We're happy, we're sad, we're rich, we're poor, We win, we lose. So there's always that duality in life. And so we reach that point that St. Francis, of course, showed to us that it's not here in this outward world in what we think. It's in the inner world. It's what we're seeking. And as we begin to do the spiritual journey consciously, then we can begin to consciously work towards that inner happiness, that inner joy. We're looking for, and in the Bhagavad Gita, it told us those qualities that we're looking for. And it's not like we have to change, become something else. We're really already there. We know we're already there. We just have to simply go the opposite direction. We have to forget all those things that we think we are, so that those things that we truly are can shine out. As the Bhagavad Gita said, the saints, it's those qualities of humbleness, truthfulness, self-control, detachment, and it went on and on. Those are there already within us, because we are a child of God. That spark is there. That soul is there. That never dies. It lives on and on. And we keep coming back. That same soul keeps coming back because it's trying to go home. It's trying to find that oneness with the divine. And it will get there. And we will get there. And how many lifetimes we don't know. But we can start now. We can go right now and begin. If we haven't already done so before, we can continue that process of erasing, letting go of those self-definitions that are holding us back. We don't have to say, I can't do that. We don't have to say, well, I'm too old now, I can't do that. And I must admit, it's crossed my mind, can I do that hike anymore? I am getting along, am I going to really be able to do that anymore? And, then I'll put it out of my mind. I'll say, no, that's not where I'm at yet. maybe someday, but not yet. I'm going to do it. And so we need to, look at those things that have kind of defined us in the positive ways and also in the negative ways that have held us back. And we need to allow those to just go away. And how does that happen? Well, that's what this talk is really all about. Surrendering our will to God's will. And it comes to us through everything that happens to us in our life. Karma, you might call it. But, our life happens, doesn't it? We think we might be in charge, but we know we're not really in charge. Things can happen like we plan, but then again, things don't always go as we plan, do they? Things just happen to us. And it's all those things that come to us and how we respond. That is the way God is saying, I'm helping you. Can't you see? Can't you change? This is what you need to see. There is no bad karma. There is no good karma. It's all just what you need to learn and grow closer to God, to let go of what you aren't and to become what you truly are. This is an example. Anyway, that's why I like an example. But anyway, there was a man that was late for work, and he was driving to work pretty fast because he knew he was late. He had an important talk to give, and so anyway, he came to his office building, and there was a big parking lot there, and he said, I just got to find a parking place. And of course, it was full, and he prayed to God. He said, please, got to give me a parking place. If you do, I'll come to Sunday service every Sunday, and I'll be really good, and I'll give money to the poor, and I'll meditate every day, and it's all this. And then suddenly a car pulled out of the parking lot right in front of the door, and he whipped his car in there, and he goes, whoa, yeah. And then he said, oh, never mind, God. I just found the parking place myself. Well, does that sound familiar at any point? We kind of sometimes forget that really the good is also coming from God, as well as those trials that we sometimes get so wrapped up in, that feels so hard for us. Those are also coming from God, and they're all coming for a good reason, and that's simply to help us. I wanted to relate a real example, not one that's like that, but a real example of what that means. Swami Kriyananda, the founder of Ananda, wrote a wonderful book called his autobiography. It's called The New Path. And it just describes how his life as a young boy was always searching for truth. He said he just never felt like he was in the world, that he knew that he wasn't getting it from the books, he wasn't getting it from his teachers, his professors, and so he was always searching for truth. And finally, he read the book, Autobiography of a Yogi. There's a long story about that, and when he read that book, he knew that Yogananda knew truth. He experienced what it was that Swami Kriyananda had been looking for up to that point in his life. And so he knew that he needed to study with that person. Yogis and gurus and meditation, all that stuff back in the 1940s when he read this book was pretty much unheard of. Now we've got a lot more of that in our society. But he just knew. And so he took the next bus, as you've heard the story, across the country from New York to Los Angeles. And he just knew that, he just knew he was going to talk to Yogananda. And he had a few setbacks, meeting Sister Gyanamata first at Encinitas, which is where Yogananda wasn't. And rather than Swami put it in his mind that maybe, he could just visualize Yogananda coming out of the house, welcoming him with open arms. And anyway, instead, Sister Gyanamata, his foremost disciple, opened the door and said, oh, have you come to fix the water heater? So kind of a little blow there. And anyway, it turned out that Yogananda was at the Hollywood Church, which was a surprise because Swami at that time thought that the Hollywood was just a place of the movies, Hollywood movies. But he went there to the Hollywood Church and he asked the woman if he could see Yogananda, because his Sunday service had finished and Yogananda was meeting with people in the back, and the woman looked at him and said, well, we can make an appointment for you, but he has nothing today. And he said, well, when's the next appointment? And she said, 2.5 months. And he said, well, inside he was just devastated. You know, he said, I just have to see him. I have to see him. And yet, then again, he began to think, well, you know, am I ready? Maybe I'm not ready to see the Master right now. Maybe I do need to study the lessons that I heard that I needed to do. Maybe I need to grow a little bit more and come to the services and see. And so he kind of resigned himself. He was getting up to leave, and he was going to do that. When suddenly the woman came back and said, well, since you've come from so far, she said, I'll ask him anyway. And she asked Yogananda, and Yogananda said, yes, I'll see him. And of course the rest is history. Swami became a disciple at that moment with Yogananda. But the clue here is, the key here is that he stepped back from the thought that, you know, he needed to see him right now, that Yogananda would recognize him and that Yogananda would want to see him right now. And he stepped back with a little humility and said, well, maybe I'm not ready. You know, even though this is what he'd been searching for all his life, he stepped back and said, maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I need to learn something here. And that's when the woman came forward and said, yes, we'll see if Yogananda can see you. You know, those little coincidences, why did it happen that way? Everything, you know, we're all in this divine thought pattern. It's consciousness. We're all in that divine consciousness. And a great master like Yogananda would have known exactly what it was that Kriyananda needed at that time. And so that was a perfect scenario of surrender. Surrender your will, surrender what you think is right, surrender what you want at that particular moment. Just give it up and allow the divine to take over and to give you what you really do need, and to know that that is exactly what you need in that moment. And that's the hard thing for us to see, because we don't necessarily think we need it. We need this, don't we? Or we need that. We certainly don't need this, you know? I mean, you know, how many times have you looked at someone else and said, oh, I'd like, you know, I don't mind their karma. I don't mind, you know, that looks pretty good to me, but not mine? You know, that is the worst. Well, it's because what comes to you is what you need. It isn't what they need. It's what you need. And it's so interesting because Sister Gyanamata, again, that we talked about here, she said, she is wonderful. She wrote the book God Alone. She has some wonderful quotes. She said, if something is there before us to do, then it is ours to do. And if it is not there before us to do, it is not ours. Pretty simple, huh? Yeah. And does it mean you have to just lay back and become a wet rag? No. You know, things happen to us and we need to put up our energy and get engaged. And yes, we can certainly make changes, but that's part of the lesson, isn't it, sometimes? But what's there for us to do is what we need to do at this moment. And it will change. But the thing is not what you're doing. And I think that was probably the hardest thing for me over the years, is it's not what I'm doing. It's not necessarily the results, because we're supposed to be detached from the results. The hardest thing was to accept that it's perfect exactly the way it is. It's going to be perfect exactly the way it is. But we need to say yes to all these things that come to us, right? Isn't it much more easy to push it aside? You can see it coming. Again, Gyanamata said, when she saw a circumstance coming to her, she didn't know how she was going to handle it, she didn't know how to face it. What was her prayer? She said, change no circumstance in my life, change me. Have you ever had circumstances that you can feel like there's just no way, and yet you know it's the right thing to do? That's the key. We do what is right. And we have that faith that it's going to work out because this is God's will. And if we can go through that test flowing with the things that are happening, yes, we are doing things, but we're doing it in a flow so that we're doing it according to God's will, then things work out. Maybe not in the way we think is perfect, but in the way that is perfect for it to happen. I know one of the bigger tests for myself in terms of willingness, saying yes to God's will, and it's been kind of my path here is surrender constantly, was back when several times, but back when I was had a really good job at Lake Washington School District, and I liked the work and was making good money, and yet we were starting the Ananda Center. It was the very beginning of the Ananda up here in Seattle, and people would come and then people would go, and people would come and people would go. We didn't have anything to really grab onto at the time, except coming to Sunday service, maybe doing flowers. There were a few things to do, but there was really nothing much here. And we knew that we needed some way which we can engage devotees who wanted to really begin to work together and begin to serve together and begin to do outreach. And I always remember when I got this guidance that I was going to be one of the key players to help start East-West Bookshop here in Seattle. And it came from within. It was like, okay, now it's time for you to quit your job. Okay, it's all right. I'll tell you when it's time to start. And it was just this little bit of a constant reminder. And, even though it was terribly scary, this is one of the things about this karma that comes to you. These things, the big ones in particular, your resistance is, no, I don't want to do that. I can't do that. It's fear. It's fear of the unknown. It's fear of failure. But what I know is that if you can open and say, yes, it doesn't matter what the results are, I am following God's will. I want to please God. I think this is what He's telling me. And it's never this, oh, I know this is right. It's more of I really feel this is the right thing to do. And Swami Kriyananda was like that with us all the time when I worked with him. He never, ever came across as some big know-it-all. He always was simply telling us, this is the right way to go now. What do you think?